Elvis was in the middle of Suspicious Minds when his iconic white jumpsuit suddenly tore open, revealing something that made 15,000 fans gasp in horror. What they saw that night in Vegas was never supposed to be public, and it explained everything about his final years. It was July 23, 1977, at the International Hotel in Las Vegas. Elvis was performing what would become one of his most talked-about concerts, though not for the reasons anyone expected. The King was halfway through his second set of the evening, and the energy in the room was electric. He'd already worked the crowd into a frenzy with That's All Right, Hound Dog, and Burning Love. Now he was settling into the more intense part of his show with Suspicious Minds, a song that always brought out his most passionate performance. But something was different that night. Those closest to Elvis had noticed changes in recent months. His longtime friend and bodyguard, Red West, had been watching from the wings with growing concern. Elvis's movements seemed more labored than usual, and there was a tension in his face that went beyond normal performance intensity. What none of the 15,000 screaming fans knew was that Elvis had been hiding a devastating secret that was literally eating him alive from the inside. The temperature in the venue was carefully controlled at 68 degrees, yet Elvis was perspiring heavily despite the air conditioning. His breathing patterns had changed over recent weeks, becoming more shallow and rapid during performances. Dr. George Nicopolis, watching from his usual position backstage, had been monitoring these changes with increasing alarm. The medications Elvis was taking were creating a cascade of physical problems that were becoming harder to conceal with each passing performance. If this incredible story of hidden pain and the moment truth was revealed has caught your attention, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't believe what happened next and the shocking medical truth that emerged that night. The jumpsuit Elvis wore that evening was a masterpiece of design and engineering created by Bill Ballou specifically to accommodate the physical changes Elvis had been experiencing. The white leather was adorned with intricate beadwork and thousands of rhinestones, but beneath the glamorous exterior lay a complex system of hidden supports and modifications that the public never knew existed. The suit had been reinforced with special elastic panels and strengthened seams designed to withstand the physical demands of Elvis's performances while concealing the medical equipment he was wearing underneath. The warning signs had been there for months, but Elvis's inner circle had done everything possible to keep them hidden from the public and the press. Dr. George Nicopolis, Elvis's personal physician who everyone called Dr. Nick, had been increasingly worried about his patient's condition. The combination of prescription medications, underlying health issues, and the physical demands of performing were creating a perfect storm that was about to explode in the most public way possible. Earlier that evening, during the first show, Dr. Nick had noticed Elvis struggling more than usual. The singer had requested extra padding in his jumpsuit, claiming he needed more support for his back. But Dr. Nick suspected there was more to it than simple back pain. Elvis had been complaining of severe abdominal discomfort, bloating that made it difficult to breathe, and a constant feeling of pressure that was getting worse with each passing day. The medications Elvis was taking for various ailments were causing his body to retain massive amounts of fluid, and his organs were beginning to show signs of serious distress. The prescription regimen Elvis was following had become increasingly complex over the past year. He was taking Dilaudid for chronic pain, Demerol for breakthrough pain episodes, Valium for anxiety, Quaaludes for sleep, and a cocktail of amphetamines to maintain the energy needed for his grueling performance schedule. Each medication came with its own side effects, and when combined, they were creating a toxic environment in his body that his liver and kidneys were struggling to process. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, had been expressing concerns about his son's appearance and behavior for months. During family dinners at Graceland, Vernon noticed that Elvis was eating less, but his face and body appeared increasingly swollen. Elvis would dismiss these observations, claiming that the stage lights and camera angles made him look different than he actually was. But Vernon knew his son well enough to recognize that something was seriously wrong. The white jumpsuit Elvis wore that night was one of his favorites, designed by Bill Ballou and covered in intricate beadwork and rhinestones. But what the audience didn't know was that the suit had been specially modified with hidden elastic panels and reinforced seams to accommodate Elvis's rapidly changing body. His weight had been fluctuating dramatically due to the medical cocktail he was on, and his costume team had been working overtime to make adjustments that would keep his condition hidden from the public eye. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime friend and backup singer, had been particularly worried about the changes he was seeing in Elvis's physical condition. During rehearsals, Charlie noticed that Elvis was having difficulty with movements that had once been effortless. The singer's famous hip movements were becoming more restricted, and he was frequently pausing to catch his breath between songs. Charlie had tried to discuss these concerns with Elvis, but the king had become increasingly defensive about any suggestions that he might need medical attention. As Elvis moved through his performance of Suspicious Minds, the physical strain was becoming visible to those who knew what to look for. His breathing was labored, and sweat was pouring down his face despite the air conditioning in the venue. The song's choreography required him to drop to one knee and lean back dramatically, a move he'd performed thousands of times before. But this time, as he executed the move, the extra pressure on his already strained jumpsuit proved to be too much. The tear happened so suddenly that it took a moment for people to process what they were seeing. As Elvis dropped to his knee and leaned back during the climactic moment of Suspicious Minds, the carefully concealed seam along the side of his jumpsuit gave way with an audible ripping sound that was picked up by his body microphone and broadcast throughout the arena. What was revealed beneath the glamorous exterior of the jumpsuit shocked everyone who could see it. Elvis was wearing what appeared to be a medical compression garment, the kind typically used for patients with severe fluid retention or post-surgical recovery. The tight, flesh-colored fabric was clearly visible through the tear, and it was obvious that it was designed to compress and contain something that Elvis desperately wanted to keep hidden. The compression garment was actually a sophisticated medical device that Dr. Nick had obtained through his hospital contacts. It was designed to provide external pressure on Elvis's abdomen, which had become severely distended due to fluid accumulation. The garment was made of a special elastic material that could provide up to 40 pounds of pressure per square inch, helping to push excess fluid back into Elvis's bloodstream where it could be processed by his struggling kidneys. But the visual revelation was nothing compared to what happened next. As Elvis tried to continue singing and cover the tear with his cape, the compression garment itself began to fail under the pressure. The audience in the front rows could see that Elvis's abdomen was severely distended, far beyond what anyone might expect from simple weight gain. His body was retaining massive amounts of fluid, a condition known as ascites that's typically associated with serious liver or heart problems. Dr. Nick, watching from backstage, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. He'd been monitoring Elvis's condition for weeks, knowing that the singer's liver was struggling to process the various medications he was taking, and his heart was working overtime to pump fluid that his body couldn't properly eliminate. The compression garment had been a temporary solution to help Elvis get through his performances, but it was clear that his condition was deteriorating rapidly. The audience's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. The screaming and cheering gradually died down as people realized they were witnessing something far more serious than a simple wardrobe malfunction. In the front rows, fans could be seen covering their mouths in shock, and some were openly crying as they began to understand that their beloved king was seriously ill. Presley, who was watching the concert via closed-circuit television from Los Angeles, immediately knew that something was terribly wrong. She had been concerned about Elvis's health for months, but seeing the compression garment revealed to thousands of people made her realize that his condition was far worse than she had imagined. She immediately began making arrangements to fly to Las Vegas to be with Elvis, knowing that this incident would have devastating consequences for his career and his psychological well-being. James Burton, Elvis's lead guitarist, was performing just a few feet away when the jumpsuit tore. He could see the shock and embarrassment on Elvis's face, and he immediately began playing louder to try to draw attention away from what was happening. But it was too late. The damage was done, and everyone in the venue had seen something that Elvis had fought desperately to keep private. Have you ever witnessed a moment when reality suddenly broke through the facade of entertainment? What do you think went through the minds of those 15,000 fans when they realized what they were seeing? Elvis, professional to his core, tried desperately to continue the performance as if nothing had happened. He pulled his cape around himself and attempted to finish Suspicious Minds, but his voice was strained and his movements had become careful and guarded. The band, following his lead, continued playing, but everyone on stage knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime friend and backup vocalist, quickly moved closer to try to help conceal the damage to the jumpsuit, but the compression garment continued to fail, and it became increasingly obvious that Elvis was in significant physical distress. His face had gone pale, and he was breathing heavily in a way that suggested he was struggling not just with embarrassment, but with genuine physical discomfort. Joe Esposito, Elvis's road manager, was frantically trying to figure out how to handle the situation from his position near the stage. The concert was being filmed for potential release, and photographers from various media outlets were present. The last thing Elvis needed was for images of his medical condition to be splashed across tabloid newspapers around the world. The backup singers, the Sweet Inspirations, had been performing with Elvis for years and had noticed the gradual changes in his appearance and behavior. But seeing the compression garment revealed so publicly was a shock even to them. Myrna Smith, one of the backup singers, later recalled that she had to fight back tears as she watched Elvis struggle to maintain his composure while dealing with what was obviously a serious medical crisis. From the audience, the reaction was mixed and complex. Many fans were confused about what they were seeing, not fully understanding the medical implications of the compression garment and Elvis's obvious distress. Others, particularly those in the medical profession who happened to be in attendance, immediately recognized the signs of serious illness and were deeply concerned for Elvis's well-being. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's longtime manager, was watching from the back of the venue and immediately understood the potential career implications of what was happening on stage. He began making mental notes about damage control, knowing that this incident could severely impact Elvis's ability to continue performing and generating the income that both he and Elvis depended on. The compression garment that had failed so dramatically was actually a sophisticated medical device that Dr. Nick had obtained through his hospital contacts. It was designed to help patients with severe fluid retention maintain some semblance of normal appearance and function. Elvis had been wearing similar garments for several months, but they were a temporary solution to a problem that was getting progressively worse. Sonny West, another member of Elvis's security team, was positioned near the stage exit and immediately began preparing for the possibility that Elvis might need to leave the stage quickly. He had been briefed on Elvis's medical condition and knew that the failure of the compression garment could lead to a medical emergency that would require immediate intervention. The Las Vegas audience that night included many entertainment industry professionals, celebrities, and high-rolling gamblers who had seen thousands of performances over the years. But none of them had ever witnessed anything like what was happening on the International Hotel stage. The transformation from entertainment spectacle to medical crisis was happening in real time, and everyone in the venue was struggling to process what they were seeing. As Elvis struggled through the final verses of Suspicious Minds, it became clear that he couldn't continue the performance. For the first time in his career, he made the decision to cut his show short, telling the audience that he wasn't feeling well and needed to rest. The crowd, still processing what they had witnessed, gave him a standing ovation that was different from any he'd received before. It wasn't the usual screaming adoration, but a deeper, more emotional response from people who realized they might be seeing their hero for the last time. Backstage, Dr. Nick immediately began assessing Elvis's condition. The compression garment had been doing more than just concealing his appearance. It had been providing crucial support for organs that were struggling to function properly. Without it, Elvis's condition became even more apparent. His abdomen was severely distended with fluid, his breathing was labored, and his heart rate was elevated to dangerous levels. The medical reality of what the audience had witnessed that night was sobering. Elvis was suffering from a combination of conditions that were directly related to his long-term use of prescription medications. His liver was struggling to process the various drugs he was taking for pain, anxiety, and sleep disorders. This had led to a condition where his body was retaining massive amounts of fluid, primarily in his abdominal cavity. The compression garments were a way to manage this condition temporarily, but they weren't addressing the underlying problems. Dr. Nick had been trying for months to convince Elvis to check into a hospital for comprehensive treatment, but the singer had refused, terrified that news of his condition would leak to the press and damage his career. He'd been living in denial about the severity of his health problems, believing that he could continue performing and managing his condition with the help of medical devices and careful scheduling. The incident at the International Hotel marked a turning point in Elvis's final weeks. The compression garment failure had revealed not just his physical condition, but the elaborate lengths he'd been going to in order to maintain his public image. The people closest to him realized that the situation had become unsustainable and that Elvis needed immediate medical intervention regardless of the impact on his career. Linda Thompson, who had been Elvis's girlfriend for several years, was devastated when she heard about what had happened in Las Vegas. She had been trying to convince Elvis to seek proper medical treatment for months, but he had been resistant to any suggestions that might interfere with his performing schedule. The public revelation of his condition made it clear that the situation had reached a crisis point. The hotel management at the International was immediately concerned about the potential liability issues related to Elvis's medical condition. They had invested heavily in his residency at the venue, and the possibility that he might not be able to fulfill his contractual obligations was a serious financial concern. However, their primary focus was on ensuring that Elvis received appropriate medical care and that the incident was handled with discretion. Red West, who had been with Elvis since their teenage years in Memphis, was heartbroken by what he had witnessed. He had seen Elvis transform from a healthy young man into someone whose body was failing under the pressure of fame, prescription drug use, and the demands of constant performing. The compression garment incident made it clear that Elvis's condition was far worse than even his closest friends had realized. What the public never learned about that night in Vegas was the full extent of Elvis's medical crisis. The compression garment that had failed so dramatically was just one part of an elaborate medical support system that Dr. Nick and Elvis's team had developed to keep him functioning. Behind the scenes, Elvis was taking a complex cocktail of medications that included powerful diuretics to help his body eliminate excess fluid, pain medications for chronic back and joint problems, and stimulants to help him maintain the energy needed for his performances. The fluid retention that became visible when his jumpsuit tore was a symptom of multiple organ systems that were beginning to fail. His liver, overwhelmed by years of processing various medications, was no longer able to produce the proteins necessary to keep fluid in his bloodstream, causing it to leak into his abdominal cavity. His heart, working overtime to pump the excess fluid throughout his body, was showing signs of strain that would prove to be fatal just weeks later. In the days following the Vegas incident, Elvis's team worked frantically to suppress any media coverage of what had happened. Photographers who had captured images of the wardrobe malfunction were approached and asked not to publish their photos. Audience members were discouraged from discussing what they had seen, and the filmed footage of the concert was edited to remove the most revealing moments. But for those who were there that night, the memory of seeing Elvis in such vulnerable condition was unforgettable. Many fans later said that they realized in that moment that their hero was mortal, and that the superhuman image he had maintained for so long was beginning to crack under the weight of very human problems. Dr. Nick's medical records, which became public years later during legal proceedings, revealed the full scope of Elvis's condition during his final months. The compression garments were just one of many medical interventions that were being used to keep him performing. He was also receiving regular vitamin B12 injections, taking medications to regulate his heart rhythm, and using breathing treatments to help with the lung congestion caused by fluid retention. The prescription medications that Elvis was taking had created a vicious cycle that was becoming impossible to break. The painkillers he used for his chronic back problems caused constipation, which led to taking laxatives that caused dehydration, which led to taking more medications to maintain his electrolyte balance. The stimulants he used to maintain energy for performing caused anxiety and insomnia, which led to taking sedatives and sleeping pills that caused depression and fatigue the next day. Lisa Marie Presley, who was only 9 years old at the time, later recalled that she could sense something was wrong with her father during their visits together. Elvis would sometimes seem out of breath just from walking up the stairs at Graceland, and he would often cancel planned activities because he wasn't feeling well. The compression garment incident in Vegas was a wake-up call for everyone in Elvis's life who had been in denial about the severity of his condition. The tragedy of Elvis's final weeks was that effective treatment for his condition was available, but it would have required him to stop performing and check into a hospital for an extended period. The medications causing his problems could have been gradually reduced and replaced with safer alternatives, and the fluid retention could have been managed with proper medical supervision. But Elvis's fear of losing his career and disappointing his fans prevented him from seeking the help he desperately needed. Graceland had become like a hospital in Elvis's final months, with medical equipment, oxygen tanks, and prescription medications scattered throughout the mansion. Dr. Nick was making daily visits to monitor Elvis's condition, and nurses were on call around the clock to assist with his care. The compression garments were stored in a special closet in Elvis's bedroom, along with other medical devices that helped him maintain the appearance of health when he had to make public appearances. The financial pressures surrounding Elvis's career made it almost impossible for him to take the time off that his medical condition required. Colonel Parker had negotiated deals that required Elvis to perform a certain number of shows per year, and the financial penalties for canceling performances were substantial. Additionally, hundreds of people depended on Elvis's career for their livelihoods, from his band members and backup singers to his security team and household staff. What do you think about the pressure that entertainers face to maintain their public image, even when they're struggling with serious health problems? Have you ever had to hide your own struggles to protect your professional reputation? The story of that night in Vegas serves as a reminder that behind the glittering facade of celebrity, there are real human beings dealing with very real problems. Elvis's decision to continue performing despite his declining health was both admirable and tragic, showing his dedication to his craft and his fans, but also highlighting the dangerous lengths to which people will go to maintain an image that the public expects them to uphold. 23 days after the jumpsuit incident in Vegas, Elvis Presley was found dead at Graceland, his body finally succumbing to the medical conditions he had been fighting so hard to hide. The compression garment that had failed that night was found among his personal effects, a reminder of the elaborate measures he had taken to continue being the king right up until the end. The autopsy report, which was kept confidential for many years, revealed that Elvis's body contained therapeutic levels of multiple prescription medications, and that his organs showed signs of the chronic stress that had been building for months. The fluid retention that had been so dramatically revealed in Vegas was just one symptom of a complex medical situation that had been developing over years of prescription drug use and the physical demands of constant performing. This incredible story of hidden struggle and the moment when truth broke through the facade shows us that even our heroes are human, dealing with challenges that we might never see. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories about the real people behind the legends. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that it's okay to ask for help, even when the world expects you to be strong. And let us know in the comments, what do you think we can learn from Elvis's struggle with maintaining his image while dealing with serious health problems?